Late October in Caledonia, county's backwoods can feel like another planet entirely. Mist rolls thick through the sugar maples, and even the birds seem to hush. I was up before dawn, driving the same gravel road I'd taken for 15 years to get to my tapping site near Peacham. Nothing ever happens on that drive. It's just you, the dark, and the crunch of frost under your tires. But that morning, about a mile past the old Beauchamp barn, my headlights caught something that didn't quite fit. A tall shape, standing still at the tree line, motionless like it had been waiting. It wasn't moving, not even the twitch of an ear. Just a long black silhouette in the half-dark. I slowed the truck to a crawl, letting the engine idle as I leaned over the wheel. At first I figured it was a moose. Those beasts can get massive, and they'll freeze like statues if they feel threatened. But there was something off about this one. It wasn't hunkered down or angled awkward like most wildlife. It stood too straight, like a person, but taller than any man I've ever seen. I rolled the window down to listen, and the cold hit my face, sharp, dead silent. No wind, no crickets, just my engine and the faint ticking of frost falling from the leaves. I called out, just a soft, "Hey there," like I might, with a stray dog. Still nothing. No response. No shift in posture. That stillness started to feel unnatural. I grabbed the flashlight from the seat beside me and flicked it on, aiming it toward the figure. The light cut through the mist, but it scattered strangely, like it was hitting smoke or water instead of something solid. I swear I saw fur, dark, matted, and thick, but only for a flash. Then the shape seemed to fold itself back into the trees, not moving but disappearing, like the mist swallowed it. I sat there another minute, my breath fogging the window, waiting for something else to happen. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was just the cold. Finally, I put the truck in gear and rolled on, eyes flicking to the side mirror every few seconds. By the time I got to the sugar house, I was trying to laugh it off. Probably a bear, maybe an old stump, and my brain filled in the rest. But something about the way it had just stood there kept picking at me. That afternoon, curiosity got the better of me, and I drove back out to that same bend in the road. I walked the edge of the trees with a rifle slung over my back, just in case. There were no tracks, not a single broken twig or patch of fur. But I did find one odd thing. The air felt colder right there, noticeably colder, and the ground beneath the leaves had a damp, sunken feel, like something had been standing there a long time. I stood there quiet for a while, and just before I turned to leave, I thought I heard breathing. Low, deep, slow. I held my breath and listened. It stopped the moment I noticed it. That night, I mentioned it to Clem, an old-timer who's lived up that way longer than I've been alive. He leaned back in his chair and told me a story about tree watchers, old tales from when the Abenaki still walked those woods. Said they were things that looked like animals, but weren't. Not quite. He chuckled and waved it off as backwoods nonsense, but his eyes told a different story. I didn't argue. All I know is the next morning at the exact same time, I drove past the same stretch and saw that figure again. Same place, same shape, standing just behind the trees. I didn't slow down. I haven't since. Even now I keep my eyes straight ahead on that road, no matter what I think I see in the corner of my vision. Something's out there, and it doesn't want to be found. Anyway, let's move along to the next one. This next story has got a twist that still gives me goosebumps. Oh, ChatGPT dis. Back when I worked nights at the lumber mill outside Middlebury, I used to cut through the old service trail that ran behind the reservoir. It shaved 20 minutes off my drive, though the road was rough and barely kept up. Most folks avoided it. Said it was too easy to blow a tire or hit a deer, but I'd taken it for years without trouble, until one night in early spring when the thaw made everything smell like wet leaves and old bark. It was about 2:30 in the morning, moon high but blurred behind clouds, and I was crawling along that trail with my windows cracked, just enjoying the cool air. That's when I started hearing something following me. Not an engine, not footsteps, just this soft crunching in the woods, matching my speed. At first I figured it was a raccoon, or maybe a fox keeping pace for scraps. I slowed a little, and the sound slowed too. I stopped the truck entirely, killed the engine, silence. Then about 20 feet into the brush, I heard a low exhale, long and slow, like something was letting out a breath it had been holding. I flicked my flashlight toward the trees, and I swear I caught the reflection of 2 eyes, not like a deer's, not bright and wide, but close together and steady. Watching, I called out, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked in the middle. No answer, just that long, steady breath again. I started the truck back up and nudged forward, slow as I could. The sound picked up again, footsteps light but deliberate, always keeping pace on the right side. I didn't dare stop again. When I glanced to the side, I caught glimpses, something low to the ground, but longer than a coyote, moving just out of reach of the headlights. Its shape seemed to shift with the underbrush, sometimes tall like it reared up, other times gliding just beneath the brambles. I told myself it was a fisher cat, or maybe even a bobcat with odd behavior, but nothing about the way it moved made sense. And then I heard something that really turned my stomach. It let out a sound that mimicked my own voice. Not a growl, not a snarl, just a dry, whispering echo of my own call. Hello? I floored it after that. Didn't care about the suspension or the potholes. When I got back to the main road, I pulled over and sat there shaking, headlights off, heart pounding in my ears. I'd never felt anything like that. I'd been toyed with. Hunted, maybe. I told my buddy Kyle about it the next day, and he just nodded, real slow. Said there's been stories going back years about that trail, something folks call the mirth, like a trickster animal that follows people at night, repeating noises and keeping just out of sight. Of course, it's always chalked up to stories and moonshine. Still, I stopped using that shortcut after that night. Even now, I won't drive it during the day. Last I heard, a guy from town swerved off that trail trying to avoid something low and fast that darted across the path, totaled his front end, swore it wasn't a deer, swore it grinned at him. The next tale's a bit quieter, but somehow even stranger. Folks in the Northeast Kingdom like to say the land remembers. I used to think that was just poetry, until the night I went hiking off trail near Groton State Forest with my brother-in-law, Cal. It was early November, crisp and windless, with a full moon casting silver light through the bare maples. We weren't hunting, just looking for a shortcut to an old deer stand we hadn't visited in years. Around 9 p.m., we lost the trail markers and decided to push forward, figuring the ridge would give us our bearings. We weren't worried, not yet. But the deeper we went, the quieter it got. No owls, no wind, not even the sound of twigs snapping under our boots. Just a heavy, unnatural stillness. About halfway up the ridge, we came across something strange. A perfect circle in the leaf litter, maybe 10 feet across, cleared all the way down to damp soil. No animal tracks, no drag marks, no signs of fire. Just a bare patch, like something had been sitting there for a long time. We stood there a minute, whispering about what it could be, when we heard a sharp knock, 3 hard taps on wood, like someone hitting a tree with a thick branch. Then silence. We spun around, shining our headlamps. Nothing, just trees and dark. Cal said maybe a woodpecker, but woodpeckers don't knock 3 times and stop, and they don't do it at night. We decided to keep moving, a little faster now, angling toward where we thought the trail should be. That's when we started hearing footsteps behind us, slow, steady, matching our pace. The footsteps stopped. We turned and scanned with our lights, but there was no movement. Just that circle, now a little farther downhill. I could feel my pulse in my ears. Cal muttered that maybe it was a deer, but his voice didn't sound convinced. We picked up the pace, crunching through the leaves, and that's when we saw it. Something ducking behind a tree about 20 yards off. Just a flash of pale fur and long, skinny limbs. Too tall for a deer, too smooth. We didn't speak. We just kept walking. We never found the trail again that night. We ended up bushwhacking in a wide arc until we finally stumbled onto a logging road near midnight. My knees were cut up, and Cal had a twisted ankle, but neither of us said much. Back at the truck, I glanced over my shoulder one last time before climbing in. I didn't see anything, but I felt it. That feeling of being watched right at the edge of the tree line. The kind of feeling that doesn't let go, even after you're home and safe. We never told anyone else about that circle. We just marked it on our map and haven't gone near it since. To this day, I still wonder what was standing behind that tree. If you thought this one was strange, wait till you hear the next. Something happened on Lake Champlain that'll make you double-check your reflection. 3 summers ago, I was house-sitting for my cousin out near the southern edge of Lake Champlain, close to the marshes where the frogs sing all night and the air smells like wet stone. She had one of those lakeside homes with a wooden dock that stretched out into the shallows, and I was just there for a long weekend. Feed the cat, water the plants, keep an eye on the property. On the second night, right around midnight, I stepped outside with a mug of tea, just to breathe in the quiet. It was windless, the lake flat like glass, and the moonlight spilled across it in a clean silver stripe. I stood at the edge of the dock and stared out. That's when I noticed something moving across the water. Slow, smooth ripples, like something large gliding just beneath the surface. I assumed it was a beaver, or maybe a muskrat, common enough around there. But it didn't swim like those. The shape stayed consistent, long and dark, never bobbing or diving. It moved in a wide arc, then stopped dead still about 50 feet out. That's when I heard it. 3 soft splashes, evenly spaced, as if something had tapped the water with its fingers. Not paddles, not waves. Taps. I stood frozen, my mug cooling in my hand. Then I heard another sound, fainter. A low, guttural hum, almost like a throat clearing from beneath the water. I called out, half joking, "Anyone out there?" But my voice didn't feel like it reached as far as it should have. The hum stopped. I turned to head back toward the house, suddenly uneasy, and that's when I saw it, my reflection in the kitchen window, only it wasn't quite right. I hadn't reached the porch yet, but my reflection was already standing inside, just past the glass. Same clothes, same stance. I blinked, and it was gone. Heart racing, I hurried inside and turned on every light. The house was empty, quiet. I went back out with a flashlight to check the dock, but the lake had gone still again. Not even a ripple, just the soft drone of insects in the grass. I didn't sleep that night, just sat in the living room with the porch light on, listening to every creak and whisper the house made. In the morning, I told myself it had all been shadows and nerves, that the reflection was a trick of light. But when I stepped onto the dock, I noticed something strange, long drag marks on the far edge, like something had climbed up and slid back into the water. No footprints, no claws, just smooth grooves in the damp wood. I didn't bother mentioning it to my cousin, just left her a note saying everything was fine and drove home early. Haven't been back to that lake since. Anyway, let's keep going. What happened next up in the Green Mountains is just as eerie, maybe even worse. Mid-September, just after the leaves had started to turn, I took a solo hike up through the Green Mountains near Lye Brook Wilderness. I'd been feeling cooped up after a rough summer, lost my job, relationship ended, just needed air and distance. I packed light, planning to camp one night and make a loop back the next day. The trails were empty, just how I like it. I made camp near a clearing not marked on most maps, tucked between two ridges, where the moss grows thick and the light filters in like stained glass. Round dusk, I set up my tent, ate a cold dinner, and sat by a small fire, soaking in the quiet. That's when I noticed the scratching. It was faint at first, like twigs dragging across bark. I figured it was just the wind or maybe a porcupine. But it didn't let up. Every few minutes it would start again, low, methodical, almost like writing. I circled the camp with my flashlight, but didn't find anything, just trees and rocks. Around 10 p.m., I zipped myself into the tent, trying to ignore it. But as the fire died and the woods grew darker, the scratching grew louder, closer. It sounded like it was circling the tent now, slow and steady, sometimes pausing, sometimes scratching in bursts. I held my breath. Whatever it was, it didn't run or scurry. It walked. I stayed still for what felt like an hour, clutching the camp knife I'd kept under my sleeping bag. At one point I whispered, "Go away," and the scratching stopped. Total silence. No crickets, no owls. I sat there, heart hammering, until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to a strange smell. Wet fur, old dirt, and something else metallic, like rust. The air inside the tent was colder than it should have been. I unzipped the flap just enough to peek out. Nothing. But when I looked down, I saw it. 3 deep gouges in the earth, parallel, like claw marks, leading right up to the tent. And they weren't there before. At dawn, I packed up fast and hiked out without eating. No music, no rest stops, just straight down the trail. But about halfway back, I found something that stopped me cold. On a flat rock in the middle of the path, someone, or something, had left a perfect circle of small bones. Squirrel, rabbit, maybe bird, arranged deliberately, clean, no blood. I didn't touch it, just moved around it and kept walking, refusing to look back. When I got home, I threw out all my gear. Haven't camped alone since. Now I always wonder, was it just some curious animal or something else? Something watching to see if I'd come back. The next tale's not quite as quiet. There's a scream in it that folks say still echoes through the valley. Oh, ChatGPT, Dissy. It was during mud season, late April, when the thaw turns every dirt road in Addison County into a slow crawl of ruts and axle-deep sludge. I was delivering propane tanks for a local supplier, one of those jobs where you know every gravel drive and every porch dog by name. That day, I had a drop-off scheduled at an old hunting cabin tucked a mile off the main road, near a spot folks around here call Devil's Elbow, just a sharp curve between 2 ridges with a thick pine grove on one side. The cabin hadn't been used all winter, but the owner wanted a full tank before turkey season. I wasn't thrilled about hauling 5 gallons up a washed-out trail, but it was part of the job. I parked the truck where the road gave up and walked the rest of the way, boots sinking into cold mud with every step. The woods were silent. No birds, no runoff from the hills, just that hollow spring stillness. About halfway to the cabin, I started hearing a sound, a high, strained cry, like a fox maybe, but drawn out, longer than anything I'd ever heard in these parts. It echoed off the trees, made it hard to tell direction. I stopped and waited. Then it came again, a little closer this time. Less like an animal, more like a person calling for help through gritted teeth. I yelled out, something stupid. "Hello? You all right?" But there was no answer. I stood still for a minute, trying to get a read. No movement, no voice, just the sound again, a kind of drawn-out wail followed by heavy breathing, like whatever it was had just run a mile and was catching its breath. I know what panicked animals sound like. This wasn't that. It had cadence, rhythm, like someone forcing themselves to make noise. The trail curved left and opened into the clearing where the cabin stood, and as I came around the bend, I saw something move in the window. A flash of gray and white, low to the floor, fast. I approached the cabin slow, tank slung over my shoulder, not wanting to spook whatever was inside. I knocked, waited. Nothing. I opened the door, it was unlocked, and stepped in. Empty, dusty, no sign of life except one thing. Claw marks deep in the wood floor, right by the fireplace, still long, curved, and fresh. The scream came again just as I turned to leave, this time from behind the cabin, right at the edge of the pines. I didn't stick around to investigate, dropped the tank, walked fast back to the truck without looking over my shoulder once. By the time I got back to the main road, my hands were trembling on the wheel. I told the dispatcher I'd made the delivery but didn't mention the noise. A few days later, the cabin owner called to ask who'd broken his back window. Said it was cracked from the inside, glass pushed out. I said I hadn't even touched the place. Truth is, I never stepped foot near that spot again. Let's move on to the next one. This next story involves something in the cornfields that shouldn't have been walking upright. Oh, ChatGPT, DC. This last one happened to my Uncle Ray, out in Windsor County, not far from Heartland, where the cornfields roll long and quiet between the hills. He's farmed that same land for over 40 years. The kind of man who knows every fence post and rusted nail on the property. Ray's not one for tall tales, doesn't believe in ghosts, never cared much for local legends. But even he won't walk that field at night anymore. It started last August, peak growing season, when the stalks were high enough to lose a full-grown man in. He'd gone out just before dark to check on a patch the deer had been getting into, flashlight in hand, shotgun slung across his back, more for noise than anything else. He said he was about 100 yards in when he started to hear footsteps that didn't match his own. They paused. Every time he took a step, so did it. Maybe 5 or 6 rows over. Could have been a raccoon, maybe a fox. But the sound was wrong. 2 feet, not 4. Crunch, not scurrying, pacing. He called out, thinking maybe one of the neighbor kids was pulling a prank, but no answer came. Just the rustle of corn leaves brushing together in the still air. The sun was almost gone now, and the field had taken on that strange, shadowless light that messes with your depth perception. Ray moved a little faster, cutting across the rows diagonally toward the path he'd come in on. That's when he heard breathing, not his, but something slower and heavier, deep, wheezing exhales, close enough he could feel it through the corn. He stopped, turned quick, flashlight sweeping the rows, and for just a second, he saw it. Something too tall, slipping between the stalks, upright, pale, thin, no fur, no shirt, just skin. He told me it wasn't running. It glided, smooth like it didn't have to lift its legs. Then it was gone, just the sound of rustling leaves fading deeper into the field. He made it out without incident, didn't even use the shotgun. But when he got back to the house, his wife said he looked like he'd seen a ghost, white as milk, shaking. Couldn't speak for a solid 5 minutes. The next morning he went out to check for tracks, but found something stranger. A ring of broken stalks, maybe 10 feet across, snapped clean and laid flat in a spiral. No animal does that. No machine had been in the field. Since then, Ray's refused to step foot in that section after dark. And every year that same patch grows a little differently, duller, slower, almost like the soil remembers something the rest of us weren't meant to. So whatever it was he saw that night, he still won't name it. Just calls it the wrong walker. And I don't blame him. Thanks for sticking around all the way to the end of these strange Vermont tales. If you enjoyed them, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us for more real encounters from deep in the woods, across the back roads, and under the moonlight. There's always another story waiting. Some we whisper, some we try to forget. But believe me, the next one, you won't want to miss it.